On the night of February 24th, 2021, an Arkansas state trooper made a traffic stop that would become the shortest recorded pursuit in his department's history. From the moment the trooper declared he was in pursuit to the moment he ended it took exactly 5 seconds. This is what happened in between and what he found afterward. 11:39 at night, Fort Smith, Arkansas. Trooper Joshua Porter was rolling slowly through the parking lot of a Shell gas station when something on the back of a white Chevrolet Cruze caught his eye. The license plate was bent upward at an angle, as if somebody had tried to obscure the numbers on the top row. He read them anyway. Arkansas plate 401 Zulu Delta Charlie, and he ran them through dispatch. The tag came back stolen. Not lost, not misplaced. Reported stolen out of the Fort Smith Police Department. The 2 men in the white Cruze had, in the trooper's report, no idea he was about to make contact with them. The driver was a 20-something named Zachary Wilson. The passenger was Garrett Cardwell, both from the local area. Both, as it would turn out, wanted men. Porter turned his cruiser around, activated his emergency lights, and pulled up behind the Cruze at the pump. Wilson was outside the car when Porter first arrived, standing at the rear bumper. When he saw the lights, he got back in. And then he did something the trooper did not expect. He put the car in reverse. The Cruze backed out of the parking space slowly at first, then accelerated. Trooper Porter turned on his siren. The car did not stop. It pulled out onto Rogers Avenue at speed, and then, moments later, it turned onto Cliff Drive. By this point, Porter had already made a decision. He was not going to let this become a long chase. He radioed Troop H dispatch. Quote, "I am in pursuit of the vehicle." End quote. 5 seconds later, he ended it.
Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands! Let me see...
Porter pulled his cruiser alongside the Cruze, driver's side to driver's side, tapped the left rear quarter panel with his front bumper, and turned the Chevy sideways. The Cruze spun off the road, into the grass, and came to rest against a barbed wire fence. No airbags deployed, no damage to the fence. Wilson and Cardwell were still inside, and neither of them was moving. And then, from the passenger side window, something flew out. It was a large cup, the kind you'd get at a fast food restaurant. The trooper saw it thrown, but did not go to pick it up. Not yet. He held his position with his weapon drawn, and he waited for backup. When a Fort Smith police officer arrived, Porter ordered the driver, one at a time, to come out of the vehicle. Not through the door, but through the driver's side window. Zachary Wilson went first. He climbed out feet first through the open driver's window, hands up, onto the hood of the Cruze, and was cuffed on the ground. Then it was the passenger's turn. Garrett Cardwell, who had been sitting quietly the whole time, climbed across the front seats and came out the same window. He was cuffed alongside Wilson. Only then did Trooper Porter walk over to where the cup had landed. Inside the cup, he found 2 clear baggies of a crystal substance weighing approximately 1.7 ounces, later confirmed as methamphetamine, along with 3 grams of marijuana, a used pipe, and a small digital scale. Wilson was driving on a suspended license. The vehicle had no insurance. The tags were expired since July of the previous year. Wilson had 3 outstanding warrants for his arrest. Cardwell had 2, and the license plate that had been bent upward at the top of the trunk. The one thing that made a trooper look twice belonged to somebody else entirely. September 4th, 2023, rural Stockport, Ohio. An Ohio State Highway Patrol sergeant pulls a car over for a seatbelt violation. The driver runs. 10 minutes later, he would abandon his vehicle at the edge of a river and jump into the water. When officers found him, 35 minutes had passed, and no one has explained how he stayed alive that long. Sergeant Knowlton was on patrol along a 2-lane road in Morgan County. The driver he pulled over would not stop. The chase led onto a road called Bebout. The road narrowed, the fog thickened, and the car began to slow. The driver was doing 73 miles per hour. The sergeant could see him reaching for something inside the car. Then the car turned off the main road into a dead-end system of gravel lanes and mobile homes, and it stopped. By the time Sergeant Knowlton reached the vehicle, the driver was gone. He had left the car door open. His shoes were on the driver's floorboard. His phone was on the passenger seat, and there was a footpath leading down through the trees toward the river. The sergeant followed the path down. At the water's edge, he could see the driver. He was in the river. He was swimming out, and he wasn't stopping. The sergeant radioed for the sheriff's office. He went back to his cruiser. He came back with a rope. Then a second trooper arrived and tied his own rope to it. They anchored one end to a tree. Then they waited. At some point, they stopped seeing the driver's head above the water. The other side of the river was too far to reach on foot, and the water was moving. The officers began counting the minutes. Officer Stevens moved along the shore, calling out. And then, from somewhere in the undergrowth by the river's edge, he heard a voice. A man was there. He was breathing. He was conscious. He was moaning.
Yeah. Right where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, that's about the best place.
The fire department just got here, too.
The driver was stuck. He had made it back to shore, but he had gone into the mud. He couldn't stand. He couldn't move his legs. He had been in the water for over half an hour. When the officers asked him what had happened, he told them, quote, "I'd stand up, but I'm knee-deep in mud." The paramedics who reached the scene asked the officers whether they wanted to administer Narcan. The officers said, "Not yet, just in case." The driver was carried out of the mud. He was placed onto a stretcher. He was taken to the hospital. His name was withheld from the initial report. The Ohio State Highway Patrol never publicly explained what he had been reaching for in the car. And no one has explained how a man who had just entered a river during a police chase in September at 7 in the morning in the fog ended up alive at the shore over half an hour later. Some things about the incident on Bebout Road were never resolved. August 28th, 2020. A quiet stretch of Interstate 555 in northeast Arkansas. Trooper Blaine Middlecoff runs the plates on a passing car. The tags are Florida, expired since June. It should have been a routine ticket. 2 minutes later, the driver would flee at 130 miles per hour. But the strangest part of this story isn't the chase. It's what happened to the woman he left standing on the side of the road. Poinsett County, Arkansas. Mile marker 20, northbound. A black Ford Fusion overtakes the trooper's cruiser in the left lane. Middlecoff runs the tag through the state database. Rental vehicle. Registration expired. He turns on his lights. When the trooper approaches on the passenger side, he smells marijuana. The driver produces a rental agreement and a Florida license, but no registration. Middlecoff asks him to step out and meet him at the rear of the vehicle. The driver admits to smoking earlier in the day, says there's nothing in the car. Middlecoff walks back to the passenger, a woman. He asks her the same question. She tells him she has nothing. She tells him she's on her period. He asks her to step out. Once she's out, he sees the bulge. He asks her what it is. She says it's a pad. He tells her he knows it isn't a pad. She reaches into her waistband and pulls out a small bag of marijuana. She hands it to the trooper. With the woman detained, Middlecoff returns to the driver's side to search the vehicle. He opens the front door. Sitting in the door pocket, a 40-round rifle magazine. Under the driver's seat, the barrel of a loaded rifle. He turns to arrest the driver, and that's when the driver runs. He sprints past the trooper, gets back into the Fusion, and takes off. Middlecoff and his corporal jump into the cruiser. The woman is left standing on the shoulder. They caught up 3 miles later at 120 miles per hour. The suspect weaves through traffic, exits at Highway 463, then loops immediately back onto Interstate 555, southbound. Middlecoff pushes 130. Every attempt to pit the vehicle fails. The suspect brakes, cuts him off, tries to ram the cruiser. Middlecoff lines up one more. Both vehicles spin off the highway. Middlecoff approaches the driver's door with his weapon drawn. The suspect is pulled out and cuffed on the ground. His name is Randy Blackburn. In the vehicle, troopers recover 168 grams of marijuana, $7,128 in cash, multiple loaded firearms. Blackburn was charged with felony fleeing, resisting arrest, possession of firearms by a prohibited person, and possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver. He was booked into Poinsett County Detention Center. But the woman he abandoned on the shoulder of Interstate 555 was never seen again. Middlecoff would later write in his report that her first name was, quote, allegedly Maddie. No last name, no identification, no record of who came to pick her up. By the time troopers returned to look for her, she was gone. She was never located. Nobody knows who she was. He had just walked into a cow pasture 40 miles east of Houston. No handcuffs, no pursuit officer within arm's reach. Just a young man in a white shirt and a pair of shoes he'd paid $1,800 for that morning. He was on his phone. October 2017. The Galleria shopping mall on the west side of Houston. A 25-year-old man named Mohamed Abu Shleiba walked into a Louis Vuitton store and spent $1,800 on a single pair of shoes. He walked out with the bag, and then, according to Houston police, he stole a car. Not just any car, a brand new white Dodge Challenger Hellcat, 700 horsepower, retail value over $70,000. Officers spotted the Hellcat minutes later, moving east on Interstate 10. When they tried to pull it over, the driver did not stop. Within minutes, Houston police had backup on the ground and a KTRK news helicopter overhead. What they filmed next would air live for nearly an hour on every station in the state. The Hellcat was doing over 100 miles an hour. And it wasn't slowing down. The chase carved through the heart of Houston's east side. The Hellcat weaved between 18-wheelers. It cut across 3 lanes of freeway traffic without signaling. Chase units, Houston PD, Harris County constables, DPS troopers, fell in behind and stayed there. The driver never lost control. He never crashed. He just kept going east. Past the city limits, into Harris County, then Chambers County. The freeway thinned out. The traffic dropped away. By now, the chase had been running for over an hour, and the driver had covered nearly 60 miles. The one thing officers could not figure out was where he was going, because he wasn't heading anywhere that made sense. Somewhere near the town of Winnie, Texas, the Hellcat left the interstate. It exited onto Highway 73, a rural 2-lane running south of Beaumont, through farmland and open pasture. Nowhere to hide, no traffic to lose himself in. And then the Hellcat pulled to the side of the road, and the driver got out and ran. He disappeared into a wooded stretch off Highway 73. Ground units converged. Additional agencies rolled in. A second helicopter, this one from a sheriff's office, joined the KTRK news chopper overhead. For nearly 10 minutes, no one could find him. The cameras panned across acres of tall grass and scrub brush, and then a single figure walked out of the tree line. He was not running. He was not hiding. He was walking, slowly, through a field of waist-high pasture grass with a phone held to his ear. White shirt, dark pants, the $1,800 shoes still on his feet. Whoever he was speaking to has never been publicly identified. Whatever he was saying, he never explained. He just kept walking in a straight line until officers were less than 50 feet behind him. A Jefferson County Sheriff's deputy closed the distance and took him to the ground. More officers arrived within seconds. When he was pulled to his feet, Mohamed Abu Shliba had one complaint. Not about the chase, not about the arrest. Quote, "I paid $1,800 for these shoes." End quote. They were, he said, ruined. Abu Shliba pleaded guilty to evading arrest. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The Hellcat was recovered undamaged. The deputy who tackled him was later investigated internally, though the outcome was never made public. And to this day, no one has ever explained why a man who had just spent $1,800 on a pair of shoes decided, minutes later, to steal a $70,000 car. Or why, after leading 5 agencies on a 60-mile chase, he simply stopped, stepped out into a field, and walked. On the evening of February 7th, 2024, a police cruiser hit an 18,000-pound U-Haul cargo van at over 100 miles an hour on a highway outside Tontitown, Arkansas. The cruiser rolled. The officer inside survived, and when other officers opened the back of the van, they understood why the 2 men inside had refused to stop. The men were 21-year-old Corey Robert Mercier and 21-year-old Trenton Johnson. They were both from Michigan. Neither had any obvious reason to be in Arkansas, and the U-Haul cargo van they were driving that day did not belong to them. $19.95 to rent by the day, according to the green lettering on the side. But they had never signed for it. Where they were going with it, and what they planned to do, has never been explained. Around 6:30 in the evening, a police unit in Rogers, Arkansas spotted the U-Haul moving through a suburban shopping district. Officers moved to pull it over. For a moment, the van slowed. It stopped in a retail parking lot. An officer got out on foot and approached the driver's side. And then, without warning, the U-Haul accelerated hard, sideswiping the cruiser and taking off east through the parking lot at speed. Mercier and Johnson were now committed. Within minutes, multiple agencies were behind them. Rogers PD, Benton County Sheriff, deputies from 3 surrounding jurisdictions. The U-Haul reached 70 miles an hour on a 2-lane road, then 80, then more. It moved onto Interstate 540, heading south. Dashcams from at least 4 different pursuit vehicles were recording. The van was not slowing down. The chase carried them west into Oklahoma, then back east into Arkansas. Speeds crossed 120 miles an hour on stretches of open interstate. Along the way, according to court records, Mercier struck another vehicle head-on somewhere in eastern Oklahoma. Nobody was seriously hurt in that collision, but every mile the U-Haul continued. The risk of what might happen when it finally stopped kept climbing. The chase eventually re-entered northwest Arkansas, moving toward the small town of Tontitown, a community of about 3,000 people just west of Springdale. And on a stretch of road running through Tontitown, a local officer made the decision that would end the pursuit. He pulled his cruiser into the U-Haul's rear bumper at high speed in what police call a tactical vehicle intervention, a PIT. The impact turned the van sideways across the road. The officer's cruiser, still in contact, was thrown into a violent roll. It flipped and flipped again, and came to rest on its side in the roadway. The dashcam inside that cruiser kept recording. One long, silent shot of a smashed windshield lying against wet asphalt. The officer was still inside, and somewhere ahead of him, the U-Haul had finally come to a stop. Backup arrived within seconds. Officers converged on the driver's door of the U-Haul with weapons drawn. Mercier was pulled out first, then Johnson. Both were taken to the ground on the shoulder of the road, cuffed, and led to separate patrol vehicles. Emergency crews from Springdale Fire pulled the officer out of the overturned cruiser. He was hospitalized and released the same evening, with minor injuries. Neither Mercier nor Johnson had spoken a word to police yet. That came later, when officers opened the back of the U-Haul. Inside, according to the arrest affidavit, they found 2 firearms, a machete, and 2 Molotov cocktails, glass bottles filled with flammable liquid, wicks fitted into the necks, ready to be lit. The van had no cargo, no moving boxes, no furniture, just the weapons and the firebombs, and whatever the 2 men from Michigan had been planning to use them for. Mercier and Johnson were charged with aggravated assault, criminal conspiracy, fleeing, and possession of destructive devices. Both pleaded guilty. Mercier was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with 2 years suspended. Johnson received 10 years of probation. Neither has ever publicly explained what they were doing in Arkansas that day, or what they intended to do with 2 Molotov cocktails, a machete, and a stolen van, once they got wherever they were going.